Alright, so I wanted to show you my setup here for streaming or recording. I got a cheap green screen you see behind me. Now, I won't take any credit for any of this. This is VOORNY's setup. OBS Studio Tutorial Perfect Green Screen Setup. I give him full credit for all this, but I'm going to show you my setup and how it's different than this. And it's portable, which is important. That way, if something happens, you can have all the settings you need and have everything going. So first things first, I'm going to put myself kind of out of the way and make sure that I don't overlap anything. And we'll make this different. So the first idea is that he says that the idea is that you're supposed to have a scene for your camera. So this is the camera scene, and traditionally there wouldn't be the display here. You would just have the camera itself. But since I'm trying to show you my setup, I had to just share the display to show you what's going on. So the first step is to start with the green screen. And you put that in the background of the camera, the layers. So we have layers here, right? That first layer is going to be your camera. For me, I had to use a tool called webcamconfig.exe to save my settings, and then save the camera settings. Since every time I restarted OBS, all the camera settings would be reset. And I don't know if that's part of OBS or my setup or how I switch back and forth to devices and it resets every time I switch, whatever. But that will manage my camera settings through the application. I can adjust them. At first, it was too much exposure, and I was kind of washed out here. I've lowered the exposure. So that first step is to go to Properties and figure out the settings that work for you. I had this at a higher exposure, and then I would remove some of the brightness and the washed out, but you don't want to be washed out. I think there's enough light in here for my face, I'm kind of squinting at it, then that's enough light. You don't want to be blinded, and this is an old floodlight with a reflector on it, a cheap, same thing as this, but it's silver on the back and gold on the other side. So I have it silver. If I wanted to do warm light, I would flip it over. So I have a cold light and then a cold reflector, so that's all cold. And I don't have any warm in here. There's a little bit of brown on the walls, and there's also the two bulbs. One is white, soft white, and one is regular warm light. So there's enough brown in this room that you still see some of the color in my white face. But that lowering that exposure helped for me. So you get your camera set up, and then you start worrying about the Chroma key stuff. So now that we have the camera set up, we're going to go into start worrying about the filters. And I've turned off all the filters so you can see my current setup. The green screen's not very green right now. We'll work on that in a second. That first step for me was applying the Chroma key, and it's about just keep dialing this up till you get it to where you want it to be. I will show you kind of what this looks like. As you dial it down, you lose the whatever. As you overdo it, you lose everything else. So you want to dial it in just after you start seeing kind of that dithering or bleeding kind of going away. So that's kind of what I have set up. Let me go back, dial this down a little bit, all up until kind of the green starts to kind of go away. And when you zoom in, you can adjust how much of the smoothness is there. And for me, the gamma brightness, I wouldn't mess with any of that. Or I didn't have to mess with any of that. My second step was kind of validating my settings. So I would, you're not going to see what I'm doing, but you can use this to look at the setup and see that you're not having any bleeding or anything in there. So now we have a green screen with green wire, which is interesting. So it's been chroma keyed out because the wire is partially green. So my first step was to apply that filter of the chroma key. The next step for me was actually to make sure that the green screen covers me all directions. And I had issues more with the bottom layer because I wanted to capture some of my shoulder being cropped out or not being in the green screen more so than up here. So as long as I could stand up straight, I had some good range here on the top that I could bounce around and move the chair ever so slightly if I want to be higher or lower. I still have room, a little bit of wiggle room. This is attached to the ceiling with some other stuff, and it's clamped on, so it's kind of variable in nature. But the idea is I have marks on the on the on the actual uh, screen itself, and I push and pull depending on what I'm doing. If I'm playing a game, I'll pull it closer. If I'm casting, I'll push it farther away. That gives me more depth to do stuff with, and also helps with lighting and all that. So at this point, we have the chroma key set up. We have breathing room here, but we have all this extra stuff out here. So instead of worrying about any of that, I did a combination of cropping and I could probably just do a mask and be done with it if I had a mask, but I had ended up with a combination of both because I don't really need all this stuff in the background. So I did a mask which looks like this guy. It's kind of a blobby mask, and I don't have to worry about objects or anything over here or anything up in these corners, and that's what I was missing was the corners. And there's a little bit of breathing room here, so I can tell if it's centered or not when I'm setting it up initially. So what I'll do is I'll hide the crop so before I start, so that I can see that I have plenty of room and the chroma key is set up and we're all masking all the right way. And then I'll turn the cropping on, and then I have a full-blown setup. Everything is like nice and pretty. Now here's the key for setting up. Once you've got the chroma key working, then you start worrying about your color. Okay, I think that my lips should be even more, red, not brightness, saturation. My lips should be even more red, and we can come through here and change whatever you want to change with the colors. It's quite interesting actually. Switch it back to defaults. I don't even think I need this. I left it on default. Before I had to dial down the gamma because there was a lot of washout here, so I had it dialed down quite a bit because the exposure was too high essentially. Now I don't even think I need the color correction per se. If anything, I would make myself a little bit warmer, which would be like a saturation thing, and my lips are red, but whatever. The idea here is, you can adjust, once you have your chroma key, you can adjust the way you want the object, the foreground to look, or yourself to look. So I didn't have to do really anything with color correction once I fixed my gamma. I'm kind of comfortable with how this looks. So now you have your scene, and let's assume that this is all happy and whatever. And the idea is you just drop that scene into your main scene. So you have a main scene, and then you drop your webcam scene into that scene. So you have a scene within a scene. And then I put my display on that scene and display on this scene, so there's like double mirroring going on. But in general, that's pretty much it. You would come in here. I'm gonna readjust it. I don't know if I should do that live because I might break the stream. But the idea is that once you have it all centered in the way you want it, let's get rid of this. Put myself. I was kind of more or less down here. Put myself, and then now I'm in here. I can adjust this and fix it all, but I'm not really too concerned about whatever, just as long as it looks decent. And I'll let it bleed over a little bit, and you're pretty much good to go. And the same applies for anything, any other objects, right? I have banners, and then there's the actual display, and then that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and that's pretty much it for the setup. Here's the padding for the cropping, and as you squish it, it changes shape essentially. So if you squish the sides, then the vertical becomes more pronounced, and if you squish the side, it's kind of complicated if the way the cropping works, because it's a relative cropping, not a absolute cropping. So the relative makes sense because you're generally going to be in the center of whatever your object is. But if you get to the point where you're confused, you can use the not relative cropping and just crop like you would normally crop and kind of go from there. But this is assuming you're in the center of the object of the camera, you don't have to worry much about doing non-relative cropping. Again, with the mask, see if I lean too far over one way or if I go too high up, my head gets cut off. I think it's actually cut off by the cropping there, but this is the masking you can see on the sides. So that way I don't have to worry about, right, again, the stuff up here. It's really the only reason I have it is for the stuff up here. I don't really need the shoulder masking or the head masking. It's more just for the corners. So if I just had a mask for the corners, I wouldn't even need the rest. But I went ahead and did the rest because I'm never really going to be past this mask. I shouldn't be, at least. Even if I'm wiggling my head back and forth, it stays within the bounds of the mask, more or less. That's pretty much it. Let me know if you need anything else, and we'll happy hacking.